Hello, future occupational therapists. I wanted to do a little one-on-one of goniometry for those who've never used a goniometer before. There are some basics that students can get hung up on, and then that will impede their future learning. So I have my goniometer here. This is the main goniometer you'll use for larger joints, such as at the hip and the shoulder and the knee and the elbow. And then you have some tinier ones. This is the only tiny one I could find, but you guys have the finger ones too. But once you can read this one, this is the one that students get hung up on. So as you've read, the goniometer has different parts. So I labeled the orange right here. That's the stationary arm. And it's called the stationary arm because it's connected to the body of the goniometer. So when the body moves, the stationary arm moves with it. The moving arm, which I labeled blue, that moves independently to get your number, your joint range of motion. That's what's moving to help you read. Now, once you get really good at reading this, you can interchange them, but I don't suggest that right away. So try to keep the stationary arm as your stationary arm and the moving arm moving with your body part when you're measuring goniometer. And then this is the axis or the fulcrum that you'll line up with different body parts. And you use this for active and passive range of motion. And why students get a little hung up on it is, can you see all the numbers on there? If you're not used to reading it, it can get confusing. So you have to kind of think about the normal range of motion in a joint. Like I said, it's not vital that you memorize normal joint range of motion, but know that shoulder flexion right here is about 90 degrees. So if you start right here, you're at 0. This is about 90. And I can get to about 180 right there. So that is within functional limits. It's within normal limits. So when you read the goniometer, you're looking for that. So if I only get about right here, I'm a little above 90 and below 180. So that will help you when you look at where to read here. And for internal and external rotation, this is 0. This is about 90. I'm not getting to 180 unless there's something going on crazy with the joints for shoulder and the shoulder external rotation and internal rotation. So I tell students a lot of times to follow the 0 to see where they start. So when you're measuring, and pardon my body lineup with measuring myself, but when you're measuring shoulder range of motion, the axis goes through the head of the humerus right here. The stationary arm, we're going to try to line it up with the midline of the trunk. So that's what you're going to do as a therapist. It's hard to do when you're doing it on yourself. And then the moving arm goes with the midline of the humerus. So when you're starting, it's going to, with this joint, it's going to be about right here. And then when I move my arm, so let's say I can get right here, then I'm going to move. You need to make sure the axis stays in the same spot. It should be right the head of the humerus, the stationary arm, the midline of the trunk, and the moving arm midline of the humerus here. So it stopped right here. So it stopped right here, but there's 3 different numbers to read. So we got to kind of think here. It's not 120 degrees. It's not 240. So it's probably about right here, 45 degrees. So what happened is you follow the 0. So if I start right here on top, that's 0 right there. I'm not starting at 180. I'm not starting at this 180. And then I moved right here. So I'm following this red number, which is 45. So I went from 0 to 45 degrees of shoulder flexion. You can also follow the 0 down here. The black numbers are a little easier to read. So if I went right here and then I stopped right here, and that's 45. So you have to see where your starting point is. It's the point I'm trying to make here on the goniometry, and kind of understand normal range of motion and how much the arc is about when you read the goniometer, to make sure you're reading the right number. And that stationary arm needs to stay stationary. However, if the client is performing or doing compensatory movements, and you can't get them in the right alignment, let's say they're moving their trunk backwards, you're not going to keep, my trunk isn't down here now. My trunk's right here. So you might need to move that stationary arm to stay in line with their trunk as you're doing it. So the stationary arm stays in line with the body part that it needs to stay in line with for that range. Some people for external internal rotation, you might start measuring it this way. If you're laying on the table and have, the access to the olecranon, the stationary arm is in line with the ulna. And then the moving arm is in line with the ulna. And then the stationary arm is in line with the tabletop if you're supine. So in that case, I'm starting this way. If I'm doing external rotation, I go right here, right? So how many degrees is that? Well, it's not 90, it's about 45, but let's see here. So I started from here, this 0. You see that 0 right there? And then I went up to about here. So that black number reads about 55 degrees of motion. So the best advice is start practicing using this goniometry and reading it and understanding the arcs and the normal range of motion. So I hope that quick video helps you. Please reach out with any questions.